Okay, it is August the 14th. This is a work session of Town Council. And the topic this evening is continued conversations and discussions on marijuana. And this doesn't suggest for those who contacted us that the town is implementing marijuana within our community. This is educational for all of us to look at the issue and all the issues associated thereof. So with that, the only person not here, Circus, and he comes back sometime next week.
He's expected at the next meeting.
Next meeting, okay. So we have Clint and John and Billy and Alyssa and Tom Markey and Barb Peckler's here this evening. Good to see you. Okay, Clint?
So this is, I mean, as you said, Madam Mayor, this is the continued discussion on marijuana, and just what the council said when you continued the moratorium the last time was we're working towards a decision of one way or the other so that it could be done before November of 18 when the existing moratorium ends. And so the idea was get more information on a variety of different topics on the issue, and so you guys could give staff direction one way or the other. At the last meeting, we talked about the different types of licenses, and then there was also somebody that spoke about their specific experiences with their store and answered some questions or talked about those types of issues. At the end of that meeting, what you all asked for was, hey, what have other towns done? What have their experiences been? What would you expect one way or the other? So we've gone ahead and given you a bunch of information showing this is all from CML, but in that information you saw what towns have legalized retail marijuana, what towns have legalized medical marijuana. If they had legalized it, what kind of excise tax they'd put on it. So some towns just went ahead and legalized it, didn't put an extra tax on. Some towns have put an extra tax on. And then I'm missing one other document I'm thinking of. Oh, and then we gave you a ballot language, and so that how the towns legalized it or not. So when you flip through all that information, which is however many pages that was, a lot, what it comes down to is it's been done. Different towns have taken very different approaches to it, and so the one town we've contacted two communities just to kind of give you a little outline on them, and one was Breckenridge and the other was Vale. Breck has legalized and Vale has not. And so I'll start with Vale because that's the easiest one to kind of, they don't allow for the sale right now. And in the brief discussion we had, and we're gonna touch base later this week, they don't plan on changing anything. They're gonna revisit in 2018 if something needs to change. But at this point, they're planning on keeping the ban in place. And I'll have more information coming on that in case there's something changed with that.
Do we know why they put? Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, other than they just decided not to. And honestly, that's part of. We tried to schedule a meeting. The manager, they have an interim manager, and it's not happening until tomorrow. But I know that they're not planning on any changes for at least a year until 18, and that's just a discussion to see if they want to. It's not like they're planning a change, but they're not going to touch the issue for a while.
What's the closest town to them that does have it?
Yeah. What about Edwards and Gibson?
Edwards is in a town,
We won't
so
take comments at all at this point. This is a work session, but.
so Edwards isn't a town. It's just an unincorporated part of the county.
Right.
So it would.
Avon is
Eagle.
on the list.
Is Avon? So that'd be the
So
closest.
Avon's probably the closest. I just was curious, like an Aspen to a Snowmass, like how that.
And the municipality up in Beaver Creek doesn't.
Yeah, because it's not a municipality either.
It's
Avon
a
is
town.
it's its own metro
Yeah,
government
metro type
district
thing, yeah.
area thing. But I think Avon that would be the closest.
So just for reference, the second document in the packet's labeled medical retail status, but that's actually municipal retail marijuana status.
Correct. And so the color didn't come out very well, but when those light colors means they permit, and then if you look down at Aurora, they permit, and you can see the tax rate that's there.
Hold on here. I want to go back to that. I couldn't read the darn thing. Hold on.
And so Avon actually, then does not allow, according to this information.
I've never seen a pot shop in Avon, but I was going to ask you where it was. How do I lighten this darn thing up?
Well, and, you know, we had a terrible time with this color. We went for greens and oranges and blacks, and we ended up going with light and dark, because we couldn't make it do it well.
I can't read the darn thing. So is the third document the better document, the larger one?
Says
What year it was
Avon.
passed or adopted?
So Avon prohibits marijuana centers, cultivation, manufacturers. So I think Avon does not,
So that was adopted in 2010.
right? And this is all CML information.
So adopted means that it's prohibited.
In that case, with that third, and so if you look at just the document number 2, and I'm sorry, I don't have a date on this, but this is the most recent we got from CML. If it's dark, like take Akron or Alamosa, not allowed. If it's light, this is for retail, then it's like Alma, it is allowed.
I can't see it either.
I can't read it.
Can you make it bigger?
I make it bigger, but still, it doesn't matter.
There's a little bit lighter tone.
It has a lighter tone, like Aspen's got a lighter tone, so is.
Correct, so
I
Aspen allows, but they don't have a special sales tax.
Right.
But you go down to Aurora, or it's an excise tax, not a sales tax. If you go down to Aurora, it's lighter and it allows, you can see that rate. You see Basalt, it allows, you see its rate.
Oh, it's, okay, got it.
Avon is that dark and it does not allow.
Okay.
So
So you're-
Avon's not, I'm trying to think, I'm going on my head, the next town down from,
Well, then you're all the way to Eagle.
and
It's Edwards and then Eagle.
And so Eagle allows
Yes.
the transaction. And just, I happen to know from previous experience, if you're a statutory town, you can't do an excise tax, and that's why they have to charge per transaction.
If
What
you're
does
a
that mean?
statutory
It
town,
doesn't affect us, but that's why it says per transaction
as
versus
opposed to a home rule.
we're home rule, right?
And Gibson doesn't allow it. The next is Dot Cerro. I don't think that's incorporated.
No, it's not.
I don't see it. So yeah, in order to answer the Edwards question, I'd have to go check out Eagle County actually, and I don't have that information here.
And then the other direction is Frisco, and they have a 5% excise tax.
Well, it'd be Silverthorne.
Well, Frisco's before this.
Yeah, that's
If you're
right.
going west of
Yeah,
there.
that's true.
So then, along those lines, I did have a good, I'm gonna switch notes here, but, did have a good conversation with Breckenridge, because they do allow, and as you can see, they've got their own excise tax in place. And in the discussion with Breck, you know, they made it kinda clear to me that it was in the culture, that 10 years before, legalization was there, they actually decriminalized marijuana, you know, so you can never make it, they couldn't make it legal, but they could take away a lot of the penalties that were associated with it, so that they could, it wasn't as a prosecuted offense as some other offenses might be. So they had made decisions long before legalization to allow for it, and then when it happened, they went ahead and did it. You know, some of their ideas that they make sure that we were aware of was.
So you're saying they've relaxed
They relaxed their rules long
Rules a
before it
little
was
bit.
legal.
before it was legalized?
And then when it went legal, then the table was set to allow for it. But they very much have strict rules, just like the state does. And
So how does the municipality relax its rules when the federal government, I'm talking now before it was legalized in the state. How does it relax its rules when the federal government decides, so a municipality can do that?
because it's not a federal offense. John can speak to this way better than I can. But when a police officer comes by a marijuana less than an ounce, it was always a misdemeanor. And then you could even say, hey,
But is it not true, John, there were, when the legalization of marijuana in Colorado went through, there were still many people in the state of Colorado who were in jail for possession of marijuana.
I would assume so, because they would
Yeah.
have been caught before the law changed and were serving their sentence. It didn't invalidate their convictions.
but to decriminalization, because we did it in the area that my previous community,
Further.
it becomes you basically prioritize it less, and you run it through your municipal court system, and so that's still illegal. You run it through a municipal charge rather than a more strict charge, and the penalties are less at that point. And it's a
Confusing.
policy type decision at that point of where do you want to prosecute those
Okay.
those cases. And so Breckenridge made that policy decision, prosecute if you did it all at a lower level. And then they, so that he was using that story to say, there was a culture of acceptance long before any kind of votes happened. When the votes happened, they were set up. And then, this words of advice that if you do go through legalization, make sure there's an excise tax associated with it, like the municipalities we gave you. Choose your locations where you want to accept it carefully. They've had to change their locations.
They changed all their locations.
They've made it.
On the outside of Breck now.
They've made it more strict. And then, and as a side note, telling that, so it used to be downtown and they
Right.
moved it to industrial area.
Right.
When they moved it to the industrial area, two things happened. They had to improve their transit service to the industrial area, because the demand increased. And they needed to improve their pedestrian connectivity. They needed to build sidewalks in there, because there was so much pedestrian and transit activity.
And that's where the bars are.
And so it just little,
Yep.
bits of information, things that they thought about. Odor, is obviously a big issue that needs to be considered if you're going to allow. Location I touched on. And then I asked about image of the town, what they'd seen. He said, at first they certainly had some tourists that were certainly turned off by it, but it's been legal long enough now there that they haven't seen any negatives due to it.
So I have a question, and this goes into Tom's earlier question of federal statutes, which, as we know, our country prohibits marijuana. It's not legal. So we receive federal grants in our town. RAFTA receives federal grants. So let's say that if we were to do a pot shop, or marijuana, legalize it here, and our town staff, are they subject to urine screens?
If you have a CDL, you absolutely are, yeah.
Okay. And all of our bus drivers, I know RAFTA bus drivers are recognizing federal grants, but if a municipality accept a federal grant and we have the whole thing about marijuana, do we have the potential to lose federal grants or funding from the federal government?
In the grant contracts, there's a compliance paragraph clause that says you'll comply with all federal, state, and local laws, and you're liable to, lose them. But that question comes up at every marijuana seminar I've been to, and everyone says, oh, that'll never happen, but the contract says different.
Okay. I just know what I have to do as a Medicare and Medicaid provider
Right.
with the staff that work for us.
Well, it goes back to dicta that actually Chief Justice Rehnquist put in an opinion a long time ago, but it was not, it was just that the Supreme Court might consider a strongly regulated state scheme for marijuana. And that was one of the things that they considered when the Attorney General came out with his opinion, that this would be the lowest enforcement priority, which is really how Colorado operates under that enforcement directive. And you'll recall that as when this council considered whether to opt out after the constitutional provisions, one of the concerns we had was what was the next administration going to do?
Right.
And we've been under that for about 6 months now.
And what is the signals
7 months, whatever.
what are the signals that you're seeing out of the federal government to this issue?
Paralysis, just like everything you see out of the federal government. So nothing's changed yet.
Okay. Okay, back to the Breck discussion.
I mean, so Breck, I think I hit the majority of the highlights of it. I think the takeaway for me at least was looking at all the different towns, cities, municipalities, everybody's done something slightly different. There is not a cookbook way of doing it. And it really kind of comes down to community values and, you know, how you want to address the issue. I assume, I think John's with me on this, if we were to, you know, go down a legalization route, that it would be a regulated route, that, you know, we would put, you know, land use regulations, time, place, manner kind of regulations, make sure that it happened in a way that was appropriate. And if you chose not to, then, you know, that's just, no, it's not allowed, retail. Or you could, you know, the middle ground could be potentially medical, but not retail. Those are three options. But it kind of comes down to that yes or no at some point that you all need to give us some direction on. If you go with the yes, then that could go two routes. It could be yes with the vote of the people, or just yes from the council dais with, you know, by you doing that. And if you go no, it could be the same route, no from the council dais, or no with the vote of the people. But that's really kind of where we're at. And you can, with that list, that matrix we gave you, you can see how all the different communities kind of tackled it. Some did it with a vote, some just did it outright. And it's really a matter of you guys and how you'd want to approach it, and giving us some direction on it.
And that was one of the considerations for the initial moratorium as well, is does town of Snowmass Village want to be the leader? And, you know, there's been some missteps along the way, or do we want to wait, see what the feds do, figure out what other towns have done, what schemes are the most successful to address that particular community's values. And I mean, I think Breckenridge is a great example, because they decided, okay, anywhere. And of course, most of the shops went for the Main Street location, and they decided that that was counterproductive to an image they wanted to portray in that area, and they went to the, I don't want to call it remote, but a different area of town for the legalization of the shops. And then they phased that so that people weren't completely, but it was still a change. And so you can look at that and how that might apply to Snowmass. I know that as we've done comprehensive planning and long-range planning, we've kind of identified the mall and the base village as resort serving commercial nodes, and the center as a local commercial serving node. So those are kind of things when you're thinking of the places. And then there's time and other conditions, so.
Do you know what happened in Durango? The stories I know I talked with the mayor.
Dean
Well, you
Brooke,
you used to work there years ago.
you did.
And
I mean, they allow it. It's allowed for.
it's allowed, but did they move? It had only so many pot shops per street, or what? I don't remember the whole story of what they've done.
I don't know their time, place, and manner, but I know they allow it, and that's all I know right now. That's off the top of my head.
So in looking, that third, that was on page 8, cumulative election totals and council action totals, is this pretty current data?
It's the most recent stuff we got from CML, so, page 8.
So on council action totals, commercial 72 prohibit and 52 allow, about 58% prohibition rate.
That sounds, it hasn't changed much. I mean, there might be one or two that have swapped, but that's gonna stay pretty steady.
So questions on the data or information?
You know, looking at the ballot, let me get to pull it up, the ballot language, the towns that have passed from, was it 2015, is that correct?
Some 2013, you're, let's see, where are you? 14,
Looks like 2013.
Well, the ballot questions are through fall 2015, aren't they?
yeah.
Correct? Okay, now, they're all worded a little different,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
according to the taxes.
Yep.
And so on. And, the majority have all passed, except for some strange ones, not strange ones, but I mean, some towns that are a lot quieter, like Sterling, Larkspur, Sterling being way out in the northeast corner of the state, and, it's confusing to me that maybe they just didn't want it around for their younger generations, the millennials or whatever, but the idea of having the
Renting.
revenue, the extra taxes, they put forward the idea of the community as opposed to money, is what I'm looking at in some of these communities that
Yep.
kind of surprised me that they did not pass.
Yep.
And, so I'm just making that point, that they didn't put the money issue in front.
Well, that's kind of the juxtaposition that we're in.
I understand.
Yep.
This is why
Yeah.
I'm bringing it up.
I almost think we moved to a community work session and
Well,
Or-
I'd like to be able, I know we're
Public.
at a work session, we
Yeah.
can't ask anybody to come up and talk, but I'd like to hear what other people have to say about it. I mean, we've been receiving a lot of letters, and,
Receiving a lot of letters, but a lot of those people are second homeowners, and I feel like we haven't really heard from a lot of the people that maybe have kids in the community, in the schools. I think that's an important part
I
of
think
the
we
community.
almost need to move into a public work, or a public comment
I
Sooner
agree.
than what-
I'd like to hear what everybody has to say
versus
about it.
spinning our wheels on the legislation and everything else. But I'm gonna caution all of us, we all know what's coming on the agenda. We got,
Budget.
next door, we got the budget, you got next door, Snowmass Center coming, we got a PUD coming in on 7 and 8, or it's a design,
Design.
architectural.
You got architecture on 7 and 8, but then you got the whole PUD coming through right after that to change some stuff, so.
And we have Enclave coming through, if I remember right.
That's in front of the planning commission right now.
Yeah, and we need to talk about e-bikes,
Oh,
big time.
our next work session is scheduled for, September 11th. Why can't, we have, I mean, and on that date, we have our goals, we're gonna talk about the budget ideas and updating council goals and priorities. Is it possible to invite the public in for
We'd have to notice as that is a
Well, I know
special
that-
regular meeting.
we have to do it at a regular meeting, not at a work session?
Right, John?
You can set whatever rules you want for your meetings. I mean,
Oh, a work
You-
session you do public? We could,
yeah.
but we need to notice it.
Well, we notice these meetings.
You don't have to specifically say that we're taking comment. I think is that what you're asking, Murky?
Yeah.
You can do that. I mean, you just have to put it, if you're going to entertain comment, you would say discussion, public discussion, whatever you want to put on your agenda.
I mean, September 11th is really, I mean, we're just under 4 weeks away. I don't know what the legalities are. Is it a 4-week or 3-week notice?
No, you're not doing a
No.
procedure. It's
No.
48, it's 48 hours.
Okay.
And I would say you'd have more than one, because people will still be out of town or
Well,
coming back in.
and I'm kind of going off what you said, Marky, with knowing that the council schedule is getting racked up a little bit. If you want to do it when folks are here again, looking at, you get your work session in December, there's nothing there, that's way the hell out there. But if you want to do it when folks are around, December 11th, that's kicking the can, I got it, but I'm just listening to
Well,
you a
that's
little bit.
very true.
If folks will be around, then it might be a time to, if you wanted to set it that far out.
And I would let the marketing committee, remember last time we discussed this, we had our marketing committee?
I read about it before my time, but yes.
Oh, was that before your time? You made this very pretty. It looks like,
That's the part that looked terrible electronically, but yeah.
I don't know, you know, we've been spending some time on this, our last one was July 10th. And now here we are, August and
It's up to
once a
you.
month, it just seems like putting this back to December puts it, I think it's too far to put it back on the back burner personally. I'd like to have more, I'd like to have the community digest this like they've been doing for the last 2 months. That's just my opinion.
I don't know if they have been digested.
I don't know either, but, well, people have been mentioning it to me in the community, so I think some people have been paying attention to what's going on, but maybe if we brought it up to the public, where would like to hear from them.
We did hear from the marketing department, or the marketing board, at the last time we went through this. It was very helpful. It helped advise council in terms of next steps.
What'd they say?
At that time, the answer was no.
How long ago was that?
2 years ago.
I was
2
here.
years?
I don't
It was,
remember
it
that.
was more than 2, it was,
Was,
because I've been here 3, but it was the last time the moratorium went in place, you asked
Do
for
you remember?
feedback.
I think it was
14?
14. I can look it up, although I'm not getting much cooperation from this thing today.
From the last time the moratorium was put in place, the council asked for feedback from the tourism, the marketing and group sales board.
right.
And that feedback was, kind of along the lines of what John said, it's not worth it, don't do it, and hence the moratorium went into place. I know they've had initial discussions about it this time, and it was a much broader, set of opinions this time. They didn't come up with a resolution or anything, but the topic was introduced, and from what I understand, it was, there was no concise recommendation coming out, because they weren't asked for that. If there was one, we would make sure you knew about it. But it was a broad-ranging discussion covering all the topics.
We were it was very helpful.
So
I remember.
I just want to also bring up, and I'm going to totally go in a different direction here. That work session in 9/11, last year, the fire department walked,
Yes,
and I'd like to be able to think about that we could still do that walk up to the top of the village with the fire departments. I'm just going to throw that out there, that started right about the same time this work session is going to start. So, it was
Yeah, it was
a
nice
tough walk, and it was really, I thought, very worthwhile, and I think there'll be more people involved in the community this year. So anyway, just think about that work session in 9/11, if we want to change that date, or so we could participate in the fire departments.
I agree with Tom on that
I
one.
agree. It was really nice last year.
Anyway, let's go back to the other side of the leaf.
But can I ask a question? I mean, so even if you lifted the moratorium and you said that they could come in, it's very possible that there could be no place for these shops to go. Because the ski, right?
Well, that was one of the considerations when we had
Yeah.
a previous landlord that owned a vast majority of the commercial property.
Right,
And
but-
they made it very clear, but that's changed. That landlord still owns quite a bit of the mall, but not the center and not Base Village anymore.
Right, but Base Village, they can't be there. Or they're not gonna be wanting
Currently.
there.
I mean, not
Well,
by
that was
law.
my understanding.
Not by law.
No, but I'm saying because ski company or whoever doesn't want that in the Base Village.
That's very true.
So that leaves the center and the mall.
That's right. And
And
the
so the
owners,
person that owns the center could say, I don't want that.
That's exactly right.
And whoever may own the mall may say, I don't want that.
that's related. The answer was no.
Okay. So I was just,
Yeah, good
Okay.
point.
But they can't even have that discussion amongst themselves, because right now, the answer is no from the town.
right. I'm just saying that theoretically, I mean,
Yeah, the
Base
town could
Village
say
may
yes,
always
and all the
be out.
property owners could say no and not allow for it, absolutely.
okay. Because there's no other commercial spaces but those spaces.
I mean,
Right.
there's some, like the Snowmass Club maybe, I mean, there's some weirdness, not weirdness,
Harmony
but some little niches here and there maybe, but
Okay.
That'd be interesting to know what people are thinking that own the village.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was Related's position, but I don't think the current ownership at Base Village has made a statement one way or the other, have they?
not to mind, I mean, Ski-Co certainly
They have
has.
privately, yes,
The Ski-Co has taken a position
Yes.
against, for sure.
yes.
You know, with the new ownership, group, I have not heard anything, but Ski-Co certainly has.
I just have a question on some of the taxing revenue. So this list, tax revenues, page 17,
Okay, let's get over there.
Where, if we look at Aspen, for example, it says distributed to local jurisdictions, April 17. This is just for the month of April, is that right?
That 18,000, yeah, and that's just from the state. That's the state distribution, not their local tax revenue.
Okay, so when you go down below.
What page are you on, Bill?
It's just the first page there.
First page.
Page 1 of 2.
Yeah, 17 of 31.
And I'm just looking at Aspen as reference with about 227,000
And if-
approximate revenue.
And if you go down 2 lines, look at Breckenridge, they got about 223 from the state, and they, rough number, they generated another 400 or so from their own revenues. So their total revenue would be closer to 6.
And what amount is retained within the village, or within Aspen?
I think that's the next page down.
I'm trying to find where you are.
Approximate 2016 revenue for Aspen was about 356,000 from almost 15 million in sales.
300,000? So we might pick up a third if we had the same taxing scheme?
Well, let's assume we do get a third. We know we've got about a $100,000 commitment to the Aspen schools, and we know we don't get any marijuana tax locally because it's all dedicated to brick and mortar. So there is a possibility we could earmark the funds for the school district.
Although if you back up to the month of April for Aspen, there, what the month of April happens here. We are a ghost town. I don't think you could count on that kind of revenue, where I really don't believe we're looking at that same kind of tax money. I mean,
Well, this is year-to-date 2016 on the bottom, on the second page there.
I just think that, it's even hard to find a restaurant open up here in the off-season, let alone having a pot shop open. We're lucky to have a grocery store open,
356 and 4 months.
Well, maybe it's incentive for the restaurants. If you smoke pot, you're hungrier.
That's a good point.
Just kidding.
Well, maybe just the candy store should stay open. I don't know. The ice cream shop.
Don't forget Doritos, Fritos, and Cheetos.
No, well, anyway.
Well, Bill does come up with a notion that would help offset the amount for the Aspen Public Schools. That's always one option. But really, we have to get into the values versus revenue discussion, and that needs to happen in a public session. So I don't know about you guys, but I'd prefer to have public sessions.
I'm all for the public session.
And I do several.
Yeah.
I guess, I want to understand, what that looks like what the format is, and,
Good question.
because that's, I think, really important. I mean, just to sit up here and have person after person get up and state their opinion, I don't know. I mean, if part of it is to educate people, how do we want to incorporate that into the, public session? I don't know. I think that we need some thought on how we want to.
Yeah, I agree with Alyssa on that too.
I'm saying not everyone may have seen a presentation that we've seen on certain things, and so maybe before you start hearing
Education.
from people, you have some sort of educational component that goes with it, and some statistical information, about revenues and all those things that drive some places to.
Research studies and
Yeah.
variety. If you think back of how, whether we liked it or not, the comp plan, the Planapalooza,
Think tanks we had.
yeah, that did draw the community. That got smaller as we went along, but that still invited conversation.
Well, and this is a much more exciting issue for some people.
The comp plan?
Well, I think people are going to be more riled up about it, probably.
Perhaps just off the cuff, we're obviously in August, maybe we do an outreach campaign, ask for people's written comments through the end of September, and that way you're not, it's not like, hey, you have to show up on this day. And if we
Right.
take written comments, for 6 weeks, until the end of September, people can get them into you however, whenever. We can ask, if the store owner's got way more data and information and thoughts, cause they're more informed and more experienced with it, they can give you 6 pages. And if somebody just hates it, and they wanna say, I hate it, they can give you 1 page, or, 1 sentence. But we could ask for that feedback from a lot of folks.
Did we miss something on the community survey? Wasn't this, don't you think this should have
No,
been an
we
issue?
discussed that.
I know, we talked about it.
But we talked about
but
not doing
but we
it.
didn't, we did
Format.
not include it.
And I don't remember the whole discussion, but I think part of the logic was, it needs to be more informed, to kind of Alyssa's point. So if we kind of ask for it, and we say, hey, here's some data, we put all this information that John's developed the last couple times, this information, we maybe make a little sheet or a page on our website. You don't have to look at it, but if someone wanted to, they could, and then we just ask for written feedback. It's
Both part-time.
purposely written, and then we can accumulate it, and then you guys get a great big reading assignment September 30th, you get whatever it is. But, it's not a 15 people loved it and 14 people hated it, or vice versa. You get to
Right.
evaluate all the input you're
And
getting.
you'd get part-time as well as regular, plus store owners. It'd be a
I mean,
variety of
because I
people.
feel like right now we don't really have like a wide, public
Right,
opinion.
no.
And if people are willing to take the time to write it, and you guys can evaluate it, then you can say, all right, this is good or not, and you can figure out, do we want to have it in person, and when might that
So-
be?
Not,
That's my first off the cuff. so.
okay, off the cuff, we like that. Okay, so way back, how do we, people in communities that may or may not work here or recreate here would have the opportunity to weigh in? Correct? I do remember some comments when we put the sculpture on the Facebook.
Sure. And you guys,
And one person just,
and you guys could wait, if you got it in writing, you could say, hey, if, Jill Smith lives in middle of Arkansas and wants to let you know about it, her opinion might not count as much as
I just
somebody
remember
else.
how ugly it got on Krabloonik.
Yeah. And because that was Facebook, it was, public, and so everybody fed off this. We wouldn't be
Yeah.
posting everybody's comments. We'd be collecting them and then distribute them to you, so that, everybody gets to be heard. But we're not gonna try and get a whole chain of.
So you don't get
speeches.
flamed or incite a
Right.
war of the words on a page that everything's there. It's, here's the information, give us your feedback.
But
If they
how-
wanna go post it on Facebook, they can do
Well,
that.
sure they can, but
But if you're not facilitating it and you're asking for comments, you can determine where they're from and who they're from and, evaluate them.
yeah, we just don't want another Krabloonik.
Well,
It was what
I'm
it
not
was.
gonna judge by who's been to these work sessions, but I haven't seen a lot of people that aren't in the business or with the media coming and saying, I should say in the business, or maybe wanna be in the business. You haven't had an initiated question. There are several communities that are gonna go to initiated elections where their councils did not put them on, and they're petitioning to have either a moratorium or an opt-out over. Clint's had experience with that, and, you haven't seen that either, so, I don't know.
Why, how about this? How about we ask staff to come together with some thoughts, if we're gonna get comments in writing about how you would characterize that, and come back to us or put it in your weekly report? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I just don't want to get a bunch of letters that are like, absolutely not, I wouldn't want this there. I mean, I feel like if we're asking to hear from people, I would like to have more thought in it,
We need to have some education
Right.
material go out with it.
You could
I
do that. You
think
could-
the point of Billy mentioned tax dollars and to earmark them for the school. I think if people had a chance to look what they were earmarking and what was dedicated possibly going towards the education side, what the taxes will do for the community. Maybe that could be part of the educational,
Well, we have to come up with the list to see
well, I
if that's what
understand
we
that.
want.
No, I know
I'd
that.
rather go to trails.
You know, I mean, as opposed to, we've all seen the letters, and every letter has come in. I have not seen a letter that is on the pro side. It's all the second homeowners and why I bought this house in
Right.
this community, and I wanted to stay that way. That's really wonderful and everything, but I'd like to hear from, I'd like to hear from everybody.
Well, you could put the information out there and the statistics that you've talked about, and you could have that. And then you could have a targeted questionnaire that allows them to comment, like, on taxation, how should we use this money? You know, those would be a subset. And then you could say, what do you think about time, place, and manner restrictions? How would you like to see it zoned? And that could be 5 or 6 questions that they could answer, but you're targeting to get a spectrum of responses and not just the hell no, hell yes. You know, so you're tailoring this questionnaire to elicit feedback on the topics that you wanna hear about.
But it's not we would set it up so it's not a straw vote, so no one would say, oh,
No.
we received 14 in advance, or, I mean, we would set it up like a broader spectrum of info that would hopefully be useful, and if we could do it well, then we could do it in such a way that we could summarize the feedback, so you're not reading, 400 different surveys, that we're able to summarize it and say, of the 400 we received back, 200 said this, 200 said
And
that.
I don't
help
think,
frame a
I think a
community-
survey would be
I'm
great.
sorry?
I think a survey would be great.
And then the feedback from that frames the community conversation.
And this is almost a little different than a survey, though, I think, just because a survey asks everybody, we're asking people to actually contact us, rather than us asking all 4,000 people on our email.
Right, but you're asking specific questions.
Correct.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, like, I think it's better to frame it that way, because then you're comparing apples to apples. I mean, even though one person may be on one side, another person on another side, at least they're answering the same questions. Because, one person states all these reasons, like if a person that owns a pot shop explains all these reasons why it's so great, and then another person says, I'm against it, but they don't give you any information, like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Okay. And then we don't have to worry about timing of off-season and that kind of thing if we take
No.
this approach.
And I think it allows, to be inclusive of a lot of different people.
And you really want to be inclusive as
Right.
take this out.
So if you can give us, we've got a couple things brewing, but if we can come up with this, I'll bring it back to you, I'll get it to you somehow, you guys can give me some, insight, whatnot, and then, make sure everyone's comfortable with that kind of, I don't know exactly what it looks like, but we can come back with a game plan and say, here's how we're gonna tackle this, I'm gonna call it like the community input phase of this, and rather than having a 9-hour public hearing on it, this will be the first step of getting written summaries.
And it'll be some type of survey, though, so that we're getting those specific questions. We're gonna find out if they're local, they're part-time residents.
I'm gonna give you an absolute maybe, I think so, but I don't wanna promise something, but you'll see it before we put it out, but I would imagine us saying, yeah, so you could say, if you're full-time year-round, folks feel this way about the issue, part-time homeowners feel this way about the issue, business owners feel this way about the issue. And
Is
whether
it kind of like
statistic-
they're filling out a form?
I don't know, I don't have, this was off the
Well,
cuff.
no, that's kind of the way I look at it. It's like if someone wants to make a comment, they would press the button and it kind of gives them a little form. And
That's
so
how
they
I
have
kinda
to
see it.
answer the specific
And then
question.
the people that really wanna give you a bunch of information in the end will have space to do that, and people
Right.
that just wanna say hell no will have a space to do that, and people, we can,
Okay,
let us, if the next step is input, and written input is the method you feel comfortable starting with, then let us see what we can come up with and, develop it for you.
I think that's the best
I
thing.
think so, because I agree with the listener in regards to letting everybody come up to the podium and,
Give me
I
your
want
vote.
it, I don't want it, I want it, it's
I don't
gonna,
think it's gonna be very productive
you
that
know,
way.
it's gonna be
No,
like
it gets,
just putting some
Interesting.
slashes down, yeses and nos and yeses and nos. It's almost like.
And even at that point, you're not gonna be counting that point, cause someone might have better points than somebody else on whatever the sides of the issue are. This is really gonna come down to how it's gonna influence your all decision.
I'm very interested in the marketing and group sales input on this issue too, personally, because they're the one that market this place and do a pretty darn good job of it, as a matter of fact.
Well, is that something, should I ask for a
Yes,
formal
I'm
recommendation?
looking at,
Does that work?
Yeah, Leslie, yeah?
Yeah, I think it helps to
Are
know.
we marketing Snowmass Village? You know, not looking at all of the production material that's coming out of the marketing department. Are we marketing it as a pot-free
No.
community?
No.
No,
Okay. so
family
I-
friendly for sure, but we don't.
No, I mean, like I said, I don't know what
Well,
everything
let's
Rose
say
is
4
sending out
bids.
there, so I was just asking.
I mean,
I would say we're marketed as a smoke-free
Free.
community.
Okay.
Right.
So if you want to, I mean, you
Family
can't
friendly.
really walk around smoking.
People do.
They do,
Well, but
Nobody
we
stops them.
true, but it's discouraged. Like, people aren't generally smoking cigarettes in public. Or anything.
Very true.
it's
They're in
less
the
than
lift
most of the
lines.
places. It's not an absolute.
Unless you visit the back decks of some of the restaurants
Okay,
where all
fair.
everybody's
Yeah, that's not my,
Right.
But overall, I think we do a pretty darn good job in the town on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I was just, like, again, I brought that up because I don't know, I don't see all the literature that the marketing department is sending
I
out.
do know that when we put on events and there are sponsorships or what have you, that's, a few years ago, there was to be, what do you call that, seminar, up at the Weston, and we had to modify that since we didn't allow. And the same issues we've got right now on another,
Mhm.
another event. So,
so yeah, it's not actively one way or the other
Okay.
in our marketing that I'm aware of. So if it's all right, let us come up with something. We'll get some feedback from you guys, and I'm not hearing that it needs to be. We've got some time, so
oh yeah.
I'm gonna buy a little time today and say we'll get it done, and we'll get it back to you and keep something cranking.
Yeah.
Okay, can I bring up another topic?
I got 2 more light ones to bring up too, if you don't mind.
E-bikes, I know that when you and I talked, the town is working on the GIS.
Yes.
How soon might we see something on e-bikes
I put
here?
it in my Friday memo, and what did I say? Is it the end of next month?
Yes,
So what we're going through now is we're going through, GIS is our mapping system, and we're having the folks that help us develop it go through all the plats and show, if there's a restriction on a plat, we'll be able to show how that plat correlates to the section of trail. I haven't seen that yet, but then after that, we're gonna find all these gaps of where we don't have any information on the plat about the trail. Then we're gonna point to John, we're gonna end up doing a record search with these guys and say, all right, what records do we have with those land? And we're trying to combine it all together, but we're probably 60 days out, is my guess. before we
okay,
have
so
it.
we need to get that scheduled for November,
Once we get the
December.
information, yeah, I know it's something, you made it very clear, we don't wanna put on the back burner, but I don't wanna schedule it before we get all the facts lined up.
I totally
So you
agree.
can see where it's at.
Because that was a very heated discussion at RAFTA board meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, our hope is, if this works as we're hoping, we're gonna be able to put a map on that screen showing all our trails, and we'll be able to say, this trail segment is authorized via an easement, and that easement says non-motorized or doesn't, or silent to it, and this trail segment's, under a right-of-way, or whatever the other tools are. That's the hope we're aiming for. I'll leave it at that.
And will part of the process be to go to the landowner and say, do you have a opinion on this?
Not before I bring that map to you. When we show that map, I'm gonna say, here's how they are today. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay.
And one of the interesting points the other day at RAFTA is a manufacturer of e-bikes who described all the various differences of your e-bikes.
Class 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3, what the differences is, and when to use what, and what have you, and what his recommendation would be. So, point is, I think we all would be helped to be educated, except for
Well, I mean, we're all learning about e-bikes all the time.
the
and it-
technology.
And the
is changing.
technology is evolving, and basically, I think RAFTA says Schedule 1 and 2 bikes and not
Right.
3, with 3 being able to have a higher top-end speed.
Yeah, it's 28 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for most bike paths, I mean, you really shouldn't be going over 15 miles an hour. And if you are, you should be on the road. So, we'll see what
But,
Clint comes
yeah,
up
it's gonna come down to, I think your decision, I think John described it well last time, is it's gonna come down to how do we get these trails? And if it says no motorized, I mean, then it's gonna come down to the private property owner and a lot of other stuff that we've gotta work through,
Yeah,
but
all the
before we
safety.
even have that discussion, you all need to see which trails were authorized under what tool.
Okay. Thank you very much for that
Yeah,
update.
so, don't thank me yet, I'm knocking on wood as I'm talking to you that we're able to develop what we're hoping to develop, so. 2 more lighthearted ones,
Yep,
or at
go.
least 1 more lighthearted one. Community photo, it's Thursday.
7:30.
I mean, it's gonna be between the concert, so it's 7:30, and this is super silly, but if you guys if you're gonna be there, if we can get the council and your guys' family on the stage, we need to fill the stage, we need to fill it with about 20 people. And I thought the easiest way to pick 20 people is pick the bosses, and then we'll put you up there, and that way you'll be,
Are we supposed to wear what color?
Color you
Depends what year you came
I
from.
know. Oh, there goes the
that was my big
age.
announcement. That
Sure,
was it, so.
I'll be there.
So yeah, if you're,
It's gonna rain, so be
It
ready.
is?
So being on stage would be a
A
good thing.
50% chance of rain.
if you're gonna be there at halftime, please walk up on stage with your family, and that way we can fill the stage, and that was the cheesy way of filling 20 spots. I thought,
I could
alright.
bring 2 dogs.
Do you wanna bring him?
Dogs aren't permitted at the
You're
concert.
gonna put a different color shirt on the dogs?
That's all I got.
The big boy takes up 2. Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Any updates?
I like watching the Glenwood Bridge on YouTube.
You know-
I've looked for the camcorder this morning, and by the way, let's talk a
It's
little
really backed up right now.
bit. What is it?
You do it on YouTube.
But this is the peak time.
I sent it, Dan Blankenship
Yeah,
sent out the link.
I can send it to you.
Yeah, would you send it
It's,
to me?
it's just interesting, but it's definitely, I mean, it is peak time and it is backed up right now.
Two of my guys came up last night, and they got their camper set up, and one other guy came up early this morning and got through early, and just said it was no real big deal, because he literally got through Glenwood at 5:40.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have many employees that live in Silt, Newcastle, Rifle, and Parachute. One individual lives in Newcastle, left his house at 6 and was at the office by 7:10. Okay? Not bad, almost no traffic, except till you got to South Canyon, then it slowed down. And then everyone else took the bus. The buses were, they started all the way in Parachute, they stopped in Rifle, and there's 2 places in Rifle. The downside is, when they got to Newcastle, one of the buses it was standing room only, and they had 10 or 12 people that they left behind. But the next bus was right behind it at 15 minutes. So there was no big deal walking across the bridge. They all thought it was a lovely walk, and then hopped on the commuter, and 10 minutes late for work, which was very impressive. However, I'm worried about tomorrow, because some people may decide, oh, it was so easy today. There was some backup,
Right.
so tomorrow I'll drive.
yeah, but for those people that are in this afternoon traffic, they might not be so happy right now.
Nope, it's bad.
And those additional buses are the ones that we're funding through EOTC, right?
We did, well, yes, ELTC were a lot of them. We sold 2 buses, 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Raft, I think it was 3, and those are the commuter buses. With RAFTA, there's still buses running the Maroon route, so Maroon Bells. So those buses are still in that circulation, and they're gonna decrease since we're moving towards September. But overall, people were very pleased.
We sold shuttles to RAFTA?
Yeah, we sold
I
3
saw
old,
one painted.
yeah,
a
3
funny
old
color,
shuttles,
and it
yeah,
looked like our shuttle.
yeah, very old.
Either sell them at auction, or we just sold them directly to RAFTA. Under our FTA money, the federal money, we can give them to another provider, or sell them, and we gave them a hell of a deal.
Nice.
It was really a welcome addition to the commuter route in Glenwood Springs. So, don't know. If it rains, we had a lot of staff that drove across Cottonwood Pass coming in for meetings about noon today. Thank God it didn't rain.
So the word is, let's see, that word is, they are gonna leave it open now,
but not, they don't want any, on Eagle County,
Right.
they do have,
They have somebody
they
watch
have
it.
cop there, so you don't have 18-wheelers going through it.
Well,
Well, that's good. I mean, there were 2 trucks on the pass this last weekend,
Yeah, I
so
don't
yeah,
understand.
there was an article about that semi.
That was dumb.
it was really dumb.
I can't understand it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask council, did you wanna take comments? I think we had a good work session.
We did, but I see some gentlemen in the audience that are here for the work
Matt, do
session.
you wanna come up?
I'd like to,
Did
if
you
somebody
wanna-
has something to say, I hate to see them come this far and listen in and not speak their mind. That's
Yeah,
my.
I agree. I think more
Well,
public comment is
it's
good.
fine, but we heard from a
Yeah.
business owner, educational piece last time.
I'm just here as a citizen following the discussion.
You speak up.
Matt, can you come up to the mic? Yeah.
Thank you.
Your name, and we're
We
fine on
We
time.
hooked you right in.
Sorry?
We hooked you right in.
Matt's very active in our community, and thank you, Matt, for all your contributions.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. Sorry for the faux pas from the
That's okay.
seating, but I should know better. I'm a former government employee from Florida, so I know better to address the council directly. Again, my name is Matt Dubé, live here in town with my family, live here full-time. Just following the discussion, kind of getting a sense of where the discussion is going, pro side, con side. Also, interested in seeing how council is handling the discussion of the matter, and I applaud opening it up for public comment. I think that's really important. How you go about getting that comment to, I guess, ensure as much as you possibly can that you get opinions that are representative of, folks who really have a stake here in the community. I think that's going to be a very, very good goal. So I have some thoughts, but I think I'm going to wait until later to present them. And I just wanted to take this time to say thank you for having the discussion, and keep doing the good work you're doing.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Matt.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Yep.
Mayor, council members, I too am sorry for my faux pas. I should know better too. My name is Scott Hunn, and I'm a former employee of Eagle County. I just left Eagle County and opened my own consulting firm, and one of the things I'm doing is focusing on marijuana industry. I was a planning manager at Eagle County for about 8 years, and I had the distinction of also being the program manager for our licensing program. So the reason why I raised my hand was I thought maybe I could answer some questions about why Vail banned rec and medical, and what are the other areas where marijuana is allowed and how that works and things like that.
Well, you would enlighten us then about what Vail did and why they did it while you're there.
I certainly can't speak for the town of Vail. I did work for the town of Vail for about a year and a
Work for
half.
Town of
But
Eagle,
I think the general sense from the town of Vail is, at least from my perspective as a resident there for the last 25 years in Eagle County, is A, they don't need the money. So it wasn't a question of revenue. I think their sales tax is the healthiest in our valley. The second thing is Eagle Vale, which is unincorporated Eagle County. It's situated really nicely between the town of Vail and Beaver Creek. So you have these 2 resort areas that are in close proximity to a retail center. The hotels and the concierges in those hotels know where the shops are. Some of the shops have shuttles that go and pick people up in the communities, so that just seems to work. So that's one of the areas that we administer in Eagle County is Eaglevale. The other area is unincorporated Edwards, as you talked about. So between those 2 locales, there are 6 retail shops that are operating today, and 4 medical dispensaries, and a spattering of small-scale cultivation activities. And then we have other cultivation happening out in the hinterlands in some of our rural zone districts. So that's kind of a snapshot of what's going on in Eagle County. The only 2 towns that have voted to allow it are Eagle, as you talked about. There's, I think, 2 types of each license, or 2 of each license type, and they're located in an industrial part of town. And so far, 1 shop is open, 1 retail shop, and I think a second is slated to open pretty soon here in the next year. And then Red Cliff, they voted to allow it, but no one's opened up shop there yet, so
That's kind of out there.
it is,
Yeah, I have some patients in Red Cliff. It's way out there.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's very helpful.
Very good, thank you.
Where do you live now? Oh, no, thank you for coming over. How was it? I gotta go across it tomorrow for me. Okay, come on up.
It's a little washboardy.
Oh, God. Take my Jeep.
Afternoon, Council. Dan Sullivan with the Green Joint. I had the pleasure of being with you last workshop. I just wanted to 2 minor things on that. I think the revenue stream that Aspen does on an annual basis for recreational, and I think medical too, is combined about 10 million annually. And Cliff, I have a couple of notes, and we've done some things in the past with some other municipalities. I'll be happy to send over to provide some additional insight for council. I totally applaud your public forum thinking. I think that's terrific, and I've seen it done well in a couple environments where it's not just the 6-hour line of, I hate it, I love it, I hate it, I love it. So
Yeah, without doing
I think your approach makes a lot of sense, and I'll be happy to send over some essential ideas. So good work, council.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Dan.
Yeah. Anything else? John, anything?
No?
RAFTA board meeting you all read about in the paper, so I'm not gonna bore you with that. In fact, RAFTA board meeting ran over with all the public comment last Thursday, and we adjourned about 12:15 and no other item was covered. So, very interesting. Your turn.
The August core meeting was canceled, and we are scheduled for September for our next one, and that's it for now. The core.
I don't have anything.
So nice to have you back.
Thank you. Once Bob's back, it'll be like we're all together again.
Things off back.
Bill?
I don't have anything.
Okay,
I gotta get you afterwards about a dinner thing, but I'll do
okay,
that.
okay. We're adjourned.